My journey began in the deep south in plantation country, where the Mississippi was a significant force in shaping the economic future of the newly independent United States. But before going into the Midwest and to towns and cities further north, there is one more southern stop I have to make. From Natchez, I've come to the small town of Clarksdale, Mississippi, to meet someone special. Clarksdale is a town located at the heart of the Mississippi Delta. It's a quiet, sleepy place, but one which has had a significant voice in the culture of the American South. Today, it's also the home of a great American actor whose life is closely identified with the history of this place. The actor Morgan Freeman grew up in the Deep South. It was a time when the segregation of black and white races was rigidly enforced. Although he lived a rather sheltered life in the countryside.
This is the dinner.
Yeah, okay, oh, lovely. Lovely then it is. I wonder whether I could begin by asking you, what do you remember about growing up in this area?
I still remember my childhood as being a lot of freedom. I would get up in the morning, age 4, 5, and go hunt up my best friend, and we would just run. That's what I remember there. I was going to a very good school. I had very good teachers. I was in a very safe environment, and what white people did, I didn't care about.
That comment about not caring what white people did opens a small window into the very different worlds in which Americans of different colors lived.
I knew that we were separate. If I went into town, then there were the separate facilities. The waiting room at the bus station, the water fountains. I didn't have to go, and I didn't go, so it didn't bother me. And by the time I graduated from high school, I did have this feeling about Mississippi's state of apartheid. And when I left, I was leaving for good.
What is it that brought you back here? You have had a wonderful career which could have taken you and given you the chance to live anywhere else in the world or anywhere else in this country. What is it that keeps bringing you back?
My parents came back. My parents moved back in the mid-50s. They bought land and set up housekeeping. So I started coming back to visit them after a long absence. And each year I'd come back and realize, finally, how comfortable I was when I came. How relaxed and easygoing this life was, and remembering my childhood here as being a safe and comfortable growing up.
And how would you describe the state of life here now, bearing in mind what you observed about it in earlier years? How is it now?
Bizarre. I learned that in my small town, the children were not allowed, maybe not are, I should say, allowed to socialize. They go to the same school. That's government mandate. But after school, no socialization, which meant that at prom time, they couldn't have a prom that blacks and whites went to. The kids and I changed that.
It actually changed because Morgan Freeman put up the money for the first ever integrated high school prom. That was in 2008, a long, long time after segregation had been outlawed.
Heather is being escorted tonight by singer Jeremy Creed.
the realization that here in the 21st century, this kind of thing was being perpetrated upon the children. I just found it bizarre.
I was about to make the same observation. This is the 21st century we're talking about.
Yes, we're talking 21st century.
What is extraordinary to me is that there's a black man sitting in the White House.
Did you say
Yeah.
there was a black man sitting in the White House?
In the White House, yeah.
What's he doing there?
Exactly. Exactly. And yet these attitudes
Yes.
outside
Yes.
prevail.
Oh, they do. They do.
Those prevailing attitudes did not prevent Clarksdale making a name for itself based on the claim that this is the place that gave birth to the blues. This unimpressive, run-down building is home to the famous blues club Ground Zero, meaning this is where it all began. The club is owned by Morgan Freeman and local entrepreneur Bill Luckett. Artists like Robert Plant and Willie Nelson have come to play here, if only to say that they were once on the bill at the home of the blues.
But it's funny, see all these people, all of a sudden from all from
all over the world.
All over the world.
It happens
Yeah.
routinely now, and it's. I'm still a bit amazed at it.
Yeah.
To isolate a town of 18,000 people in the middle of really nowhere,
Yeah.
to be here from all over the world.
And what do you think it is that actually brings them here?
Well, we've gotten wonderful publicity, and this is just a draw. It's a draw. I mean, to hear the real blues music in a gritty little town where it all began, and the blues music evolved into every form of modern music. Even hip-hop came from the blues.
And to think it all started with plantation workers and their informal underground blues music. I leave Clarksdale remembering Morgan Freeman's words about old attitudes in the Deep South. And the South does move at its own pace, albeit in a country with an infinite capacity for change. Continuing my journey following the Mississippi, I'm in the Mid-South. From Clarksdale, my next stop is the state of Tennessee and the famous city of Memphis. Memphis grew to prominence gradually in the 19th century as the largest stillwater harbor on the Mississippi. Its founders had grand visions of what the city could become and named it after the ancient Egyptian capital on the Nile.
Memphis is famous around the world for a great variety of things. But what you won't expect to find here is this.
Taking that Egyptian link perhaps a little too far, Memphis built the Great American Pyramid. It's the first of many surprises in this city. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, on my journey along the Mississippi. This is home to some of the legends of 20th century music. Elvis Presley, Roy Orbison, B.B. King, Otis Redding.
Boom, 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 boom. Gonna shoot you right down.
And this is the place where many of the greats have played, right here on Beale Street.
With me.
Local musician Memphis Jones tells me he's always wanted to follow in their footsteps.
As a musician, Beale Street is the holy grail. I mean, Beale Street is the thing that has inspired all of my heroes. So as a musician, I would say Beale Street still has it, still does.
So it's more than just a tourist trap.
So much more. You can tell as soon as you put your feet on Beale, as soon as you breathe the air on Beale, you know you're standing in the middle of greatness. Beale Street is just one of those places. It always has been, always will be.
Boom, 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 boom. Gonna shoot you right down, right off of your feet.
So anybody who wants to be considered a good musician, they must ply their trade here. Is
Absolutely. This is top in Memphis, the echelon of Memphis musicians. You've got to be the best to play here. This is the face for the entire free world, and people coming from around the world got to get in a long line, man, and they got to stand and they got to pay their dues for a long time before they're invited to a bandstand on Beale.
And of course, given its importance, Elvis must have been here.
Absolutely. Elvis Presley, Memphis history. This is where my heartbeat is right now, Sir Trevor. A white kid singing the blues, but loving the culture where the blues comes from. There is no Elvis without Beale Street. There's no Graceland without Beale Street.
The city of Memphis is still mad about Elvis. He lived here from the age of 13. He made his first records here in Sun Studio. It's now designated a historic landmark.
16 coaches long.
Local musician Amy Laver shows me the studio. She now plays all over the world, but explains how special this place is.
And this
This
is the studio.
the studio.
Wow. It's amazing to be here.
I think so. I think it's somewhat of a church for musicians, really. There's not a whole lot to see, obviously, in this room. It's more of what you feel in this room. This ceiling, this wacky design in the ceiling here, that prevents the sound from reflecting directly back down to you. So it's actually, when that door is shut, this is a very dead, still sounding room. Just
This was the kind of thing that exists in the first studios I ever knew when I started out in radio centuries ago.
Right.
It reminds me of this, and I know what you mean about the sound. So it's really, really sort of very old-fashioned.
It's very old-fashioned. Even still today, I think that people that come in here to record actually sound better.
Really?
Yeah, there's something about this place. The energy of it, I think, makes people better.
And just looking around on the walls here, I mean, there's Elvis.
Yes.
And Jerry Lee Lewis. And Johnny Cash.
Right.
My
And then in the
goodness.
center there is Carl Perkins.
Yeah.
This is roughly where Elvis stood when he made his earliest recordings, right here. Bob Dylan came here to Sun Studio.
Bob Dylan was
Bob
there as
Dylan
well.
came, but not to record. He wanted to come kiss the X where Elvis stood and made these
I
recordings.
don't believe that people actually marked the spot where he stood.
Absolutely. And you'd still believe that people still kiss that X every day.
I don't believe it.
They really do. And initially, as the story goes, Sam had first had Elvis facing into the control room where Sam Phillips would man the ship, so to speak, from in there.
Yeah.
But Elvis, the Elvis that we all think we know as being the most confident, hip-shaking guy in the world, apparently would get terrified singing to Sam Phillips in that window. So he moved Elvis here to
And he
sing
faced the other way.
facing his band.
Walking down by the river, he'd take me there by the hand. We'd watch that sunset on that river, just me and my man. Just me.
By day, people come in their hundreds to salute the memory of the legends who played here. Come the evening, and it reverts to being a recording studio for artists like Amy. I look in on one recording session.
I thought about trying to hide.
Memphis is always seeking to build on its reputation as one of the innovative music capitals of the world. In this city, you will frequently hear a fusion of country, jazz, and blues. As night falls, Beale Street explodes into life. If Memphis manages to project a particularly vibrant image, it owes it all to Beale Street. A a mere block or two away, Memphis dies. The city never recovered from something that happened here one evening way back in 1968. Already facing a decline in its fortunes, Memphis now carried the additional burden as being the place where Dr. Martin Luther King was shot and killed. The assassination of the civil rights leader shook America to its roots and shocked the civilized world. Dr. King had come to Memphis to support black sanitation workers who had gone on strike to protest against discriminatory employment practices. I'm on my way to the Mason Temple, where on that visit, Dr. King made his last ever public speech. The one in which he predicted that he may never get to the promised land of freedom and equality.
I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
Dr. King was known as a great orator. What made the Mason Temple speech memorable was its sadly accurate prophecy. Meeting me here is Reverend Samuel Kiles, a former colleague of Dr. King's who was in the congregation that night.
Reverend Kiles.
Oh, yes.
I'm Trevor McDonald. It's an honor to meet you, sir.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
Where were you sitting that night, April 3rd, 1968?
One of those chairs right there.
In the front row. And what was the atmosphere in the congregation that night?
Well, it was thundering and lightning, and Martin thought there wouldn't be many people here at the church. So when we saw the crowd, he said, oh no. He said, these people have come to hear King. We had no way of knowing that would be the last speech of his life.
Although Dr. King preached non-violence, his campaign for race equality made him such an obvious target that he was philosophical about how his life might end.
What about the content of that speech? Were you surprised about that?
There have been so many death threats against his life. Finally, he said, stop telling me about him. I don't want to hear it. Just don't tell me. He had said on other occasions, I'll never live to be 40. Not that I wouldn't like to. And that's what many people don't realize, how young he was. He wasn't even 40. He knew his time wasn't long. He just didn't have a time and a date.
Yes, he said, I may not live to see it
I
with
may
you.
not get there.
I may not get there.
And I'm so certain he knew he wouldn't get there. Rather than saying, I may not get there, I'm so certain he knew it. And instead of saying, I will not, he softened it for us and say, I may not, knowing full well that he would not.
So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
What was the reaction of the congregation?
Oh, it was wonderful. They accepted it. And he just lifted us out of our seats. He worked himself and preached himself through the fear of death. Pushed it away from him. Just got it away from him. And that's what he held on to. The next day, dinner was to be served at my home. And he was in such a joyful mood because he got all that death thing away from him.
Even talking about it now releases all sorts of emotions, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It does.
Reverend Kiles was only a few feet away from Dr. King when the fatal shot rang out. He takes me to the scene of the crime. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, with Reverend Samuel Kiles, who witnessed the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King
in April 1968. Reverend Kiles shows me the motel where Dr. King was a guest that night. It was, in 1968, one of only a few black-owned motels in Memphis.
And here we are, the Lorraine Motel.
Yeah.
You can see the sign there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it, Lorraine Motel.
Yeah.
And this courtyard was filled with people.
Reverend Kiles had come to take Dr. King to dinner. Retracing his steps, he recalls what happened.
So these are the steps that you would have walked up to
I came up this to get to the room.
To the room.
I was parked back here someplace.
Yeah. And this is room 306.
So I brought Martin out here so he could wave at the people.
So there was a crowd down there, and he came out partly to acknowledge the crowd.
Yeah, and that's when the shot rang out. Kapaya. I looked back, he'd been knocked from the railing back onto this place. Bullet hit him in the side of his face, went down into his chest. And it was unbelievable. Blood was just gushing out of his face. It was so much blood, we couldn't get the blood up. I ran back in the room and I wanted to use the phone. I was beating on the wall saying, answer the phone, answer the phone. I thought I was having a nightmare, but the nightmare was I was awake. That was the nightmare for me, I was awake. The police got about right to where the end of the sidewalk is, and I hollered to them, call an ambulance on your police radio, Dr. King has been shot. And they said, where did the shot come from? So the famous picture of us pointing is in response.
They were all pointing to where the shots came from.
That small window.
Yeah.
In the middle building.
Dr. Martin Luther King has been shot and wounded, possibly critically wounded, in Memphis, Tennessee this evening. The exact extent of his injuries not known at this time.
Was it immediately clear that it was fatal?
On the balcony, it was. It was.
But it was one shot, but one shot which rang out across the world.
Isn't that something? That is true. All over the world.
A petty crook from out of town, James Earl Ray, was convicted of the murder. Today, the Lorraine Motel is a civil rights museum. Room 306 has been kept as it was that night. Reverend Kiles regularly takes visitors to the place where his friend was shot.
I took the Dalai Lama through the motel.
Yeah.
And he said to the press, he said, I learned something today from Reverend Kiles. And I'm saying to myself, what did the Dalai Lama learn from me? He said, yes, you can kill the dreamer, but no, you cannot kill the dream. The dream is still living, it's still living, it's still living.
The killing of Martin Luther King lit a fuse of deep-seated anger. American ghettos burned, cities rioted. All such a distant memory now from the election in 2008 of America's first black president. Although the killing was linked to Memphis only by chance, the city paid a heavy price. Businesses and prominent city people upped stakes and left. Some Memphis residents stayed, determined to keep the city alive.
Oh, very nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you. Thank you, thank you. Good to see you.
Come on in.
What a wonderful place this is.
Well, it has a great view.
Fashion designer and philanthropist Pat Kerr lives in this penthouse apartment with views across the Mississippi.
Gosh, what a lovely, lovely view.
It's fabulous, isn't it? It's particularly nice for sunsets.
And to be able to say that you live overlooking this wonderful bit of the Mississippi.
It's fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, I think that we all get our energy from it.
Yeah.
Her work as a tireless city fundraiser has been noticed across the nation.
This is from Ronald Reagan the night that we lit the bridge. He sent me a letter, which was very sweet.
That was very nice of him. He's pleased to extend greetings to all those gathered for the lights, for the light ceremony of the world's largest illuminated letter. M for Memphis in Mississippi, and I suppose M for Martin too.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. Now you were here on that fateful day in April 1968 when Martin Luther King was shot.
I had just come to Memphis. I was absolutely, you know, I didn't really know what to think. I mean, I recall, you know, they put a curfew on Memphis and you couldn't go out, you couldn't leave, and the tanks were all rolling down the streets and there were riots, and I mean, it was terrifying. It was really, really terrifying.
It's still amazing, isn't it, that just one event can change the sort of fortunes of a city just almost instantly.
Exactly. I mean, it's a random act. You never know. It's a blink of an eye, isn't it? How life can change all of us. Economically, it's taken us a long time for us to... For an example, at the time, Memphis and Atlanta were parallel. You go into Atlanta now, and you see this metropolis.
And you look at Memphis now.
And you look at Memphis, and it is growing.
Yeah, but you're a long way behind.
We are somewhat behind, and yet we have the power of positive thinking behind us. We really do.
Do other people think it will ever emerge from the cloud of that tragic event?
Well, if they don't, maybe they should move to another city.
In 1973, Memphis, blighted by a tragedy for which it bore no real responsibility, was thrown a lifeline by a local businessman. What he set up is now one of America's largest corporations. To see it at work, I'm on my way out to the airport.
Okay, 1365, you can go ahead and park at gate 261.
Every night, Memphis International Airport closes its doors to passenger traffic and becomes one of the largest cargo airports in the world. It's run by the express courier FedEx. "60% of all its packages from around the world are sorted here, and it all takes place in the dead of night." John Donovan is Vice President of Operations.
The idea, which is extraordinary, is that a civilian airport is taken over by a commercial company for this operation.
Correct. It starts about 10:30 at night, and before 10:30 at night, it's like a ghost town. And then the operation runs for about 4 hours to 5 hours. And tomorrow morning, about 4 or 5 a.m., it's another ghost town, and all 10,000 people have gone home.
So this airport keeps changing its role.
Oh, it's very dynamic. And in the morning, it turns into one of Delta Airlines' biggest terminals here in the U.S. So in terms of tonnage, it's the busiest airport in the world.
The operation is impressive. It employs 10,000 night workers from the city of Memphis and the surrounding districts. Charles Lewis has been working this shift for 7 years.
Charles, I'm looking at that clock up there. It says it's 2 minutes to 11 at night.
Okay.
This is the start of your working day.
That's right.
You have a kip in the day, you have a sleep in the day?
Well, you don't sleep like normal people anymore. No. You get naps like babies do. And so
there's something about this which feels a bit abnormal, doesn't it?
It is abnormal. But you get adjusted.
Yeah.
I suppose you're going to tell me you have a day job as well now, do you?
Well, actually, I'm semi-retired. I do have a business of my own that I work during the day for the most part. So this is like a secondary outlet for me.
I tell you what that's called, burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, I'm a little old for that.
At the rate of every couple of minutes, cargo planes touch down from cities across the globe. Sorting these packages is not a particularly well-paid job. But with it comes medical insurance, and that's a big bonus to any worker in the United States, however unusual and antisocial the hours. In 90 minutes, the planes are ready to take off again, carrying every conceivable kind of cargo.
What are some of the most extraordinary things that people ship, send from one place to another?
We ship, you know, we don't like to say no to anything. We'll ship anything. So we've shipped pandas, we've shipped gorillas, we've shipped horses, we've shipped race cars. Anything that'll fit inside the door of that aircraft, we're going to ship.
You know I can be found sitting home all alone.
Memphis is also famous for something much bigger than the FedEx operation.
Don't be cruel.
This is the city that gave Elvis Presley to the world.
Baby, if I made you mad.
And it's with Elvis in mind that I'm off to meet someone who knew him intimately and who knew a great deal about his early life, a former girlfriend.
Don't be cruel to who heart is true. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, you're crying all the time. You ain't nothing.
There are 1,000 Elvis Presley stories in Memphis, but one person who knew him better than most has rarely talked about him on the record. And I'm off to see her in the sleepy little town of Trenton, Tennessee. This is the home of one of Elvis Presley's former girlfriends.
Well, they said you was high class. Well, that was the line.
How are you?
Oh, very nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, Jim.
Pleasure
to meet you. Thank you. Thank you.
Barbara Hearn's relationship with Elvis Presley began in the 1950s when she was 19. Now 74, she runs a bed and breakfast with her husband Jim. What she has to say about Elvis is fascinating. Elvis was 19 when they met. He'd been dating Barbara's friend. Barbara's relationship with the star began just as he started his climb to international fame.
Some of the images of some of the pictures of you and Elvis here, I mean, this is a fascinating one.
This was the 4th of July, 1956, and he had cut Don't Be Cruel.
You must have been the envy of all the girls at that time.
I think so.
I can well imagine they think, you know, why Barbara?
And I used to wonder the same thing. I would stand at the window and look out at all the girls lining Audubon Drive, particularly. That's where this picture was taken. And I would wonder, why am I on the inside and they're on the outside?
Yeah, how did that feel?
Well, sort of otherworldly, sort of strange, you know.
So why do you think you were on the inside and the others were on the outside?
One reason, I think, is that I had known him before. And I think he trusted me. I dated him steadily for a year. He never dated anyone steadily. But
you were aware of that?
Yes. And that's another thing that's very strange about him. Any other boyfriend I had that wasn't faithful to me would have been shown the door. But with Elvis, he was different, you know? You could understand. And I understood the girls going after him, too.
And you were quite resigned to that?
Well, as we were speaking, I was on the inside and they were on the outside, so that was okay.
So that was fine?
Yes, that was
it's
fine.
Wonderful. And there's this one here, which is a sort of very passionate embrace.
Oh, isn't it, though? Well, he and the photographer got together, unbeknownst to me, And he let me in the side of the car, as young men used to do, and walked around the car and opened it. And just as he opened the door, he reached over and grabbed me and kissed me. And the photographer was in the back seat.
Oh, right.
They
So this
had
was
planned.
staged, was
They
it?
had planned the whole. Not on my part, but on their part, it was.
Yeah. When you look back at these images now, I mean, what are your thoughts about them?
In a way, it's like looking at someone else, a spectator. And can I tell you a little sweet story right here? I was going to go to college, and I lived quite a distance from University of Memphis. And he said, well, how are you going to get to college? And I said, well, I'll ride the bus. He said, you're blocks away from the bus stop. I said, I don't care. I've thought it all through, and I'm going to go. A couple of days later, we were out riding on a motorcycle. He pulled into a car lot, and he told the salesman, I want that car for this girl. And I was just flabbergasted. He said, now you don't have to ride the bus.
And when he started becoming that famous, did you entertain ideas about the permanence of this relationship or not?
Well, I was lucky on one point in that I did not fall in love, passionately in love with him, you know?
Why was that?
I wonder if it was because maybe a part of me realized that that's the way to get your heart broken. I don't know. I don't know, but...
You were worried by his fame, by his popularity?
No, not so much as it was him.
How did this relationship end?
Well, I said we started out as friends. We were sweethearts for a while, and we ended as friends. But I think you can tell from Elvis, and you know, you're not totally platonic all the time.
And you never looked back and thought, wow, I've missed out here. What could have been?
I've looked back and thought, I wish I could have stayed in his life for longer, and I wish I could have been there when certain things happened. But no, I moved on.
Now, you were telling me about some of the records that he produced when he was still very close to you.
Yes, yes.
And,
in fact, this is
one of them.
This is one of my favorites. In the pictures you showed when I've got the polka dot dress on, this is one we're listening to over and over and over.
This was great. This was great.
Oh, it was a wonderful record. You see, you can't...
Yeah, I know. You know. Yes,
you can't listen to it without moving.
No, it's wonderful.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know who wrote that, but I know he loved it. He loved that record.
Yeah.
So did I.
While Elvis headed for superstardom, Barbara married and raised a family. She says she always knew he'd be there if ever she needed him. When Elvis Presley died in 1977, Barbara decided to remember her friend as she'd always known him.
I did not go to the funeral. I did not see him dead. And when you don't see someone, you can almost pretend they're still there, you know?
Barbara Hearn's memories revive images of a golden age when one rock and roll superstar took American music and the world by storm. Leaving Barbara Hearn and Trenton, Tennessee, I'm off to the final stop on this leg of my journey. And it takes me to the other side of the Mississippi and into East Prairie, Missouri. The Mississippi has always been a generous provider of agricultural riches, but it's also a ferocious beast. When the river flooded in 2011, it gobbled up East Prairie. The floods created a lake covering an area of some 200 square miles. It crushed everything in its path. With the waters only slowly receding, I'm shown around the affected area by John Hutchison, whose family have farmed here for generations. He's never seen anything like it.
John, what's this here?
This was one of the homes that was destroyed by the water. The water got in it. The wave action will literally tear the walls apart, and it just basically washed it off the foundation. This was a functioning home. There were people living here like everywhere in the spillway, and the water actually began to pick it up. I think if it weren't for that tree behind it, it would have actually probably not even be here. I think it would just be scattered across the land.
Would have flattened it?
Yes, sir. I think it would have just torn it completely apart.
And is it a sort of solid wall of water, or does it come in waves?
No,
or?
actually, it came in and began to spread, and then it began to rise.
It's such a picture of just total devastation.
Yes, sir.
What about the insurance on things like this? What happens there?
I know a lot of places like this, there was no insurance. Probably on this particular one, there wasn't. The flood insurance is so catastrophically high that you just simply can't afford it living over here because this is a floodway.
Yeah.
Quotation. But
so that's a terrible conundrum, really, isn't it? Insurance is too expensive, but living in this area, you kind of need it.
Yes, sir.
This is the area where John's crops once flourished.
Wow, this is amazing.
Yes, sir. It was something to see when it was all up.
When the waters actually flooded here, how high were they?
Probably from where we're standing about 8 feet over the top of our head, so about 14 feet on this particular area right here.
So this looks pretty horrendous as it is, but it was even worse.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 14 feet straight up.
And all this is your land, or should I say, what was your land?
It was, yes, sir. It will be again.
It sounds a rather precarious way of an existence, really, precarious way to live.
I've always said that farming is a fantastic way to live, but it's a terrible way to make a living.
But just looking at this, it's almost a kind of apocalyptic scene. It's horrendous.
Yes, sir, it is.
The extraordinary fact is the Mississippi gives a lot of fertility to this part of the country.
It's made this country what it is.
But then it also destroys a lot of livelihoods.
Yes, sir, it can. There are no free lunches. We have to pay it for what it gives us. We have to utilize what it gives us when we can, and then hope that it doesn't take it from us long enough that it puts us out of business. Because she's going to do what she's going to do.
You have to be an optimist, really, don't you?
Sure you do. Either that or an idiot.